missing children, rapes, those types of things. Those are the things we can do something about. We do that with allocation of manpower control techniques, knowing where the crime occurs. I hope that answers your question. At least that's how I would propose to do it.
You support the supporters or the advocates of the property crime control?
Property crime control.
Yeah, that's the one that Chief Ortega is pushing now. So the police can go into private properties and arrest people, or the domestic people because they had a fight or something like that, regardless of whether they're related or they're not related or anything like that.
I'm not aware of the property one. I am aware of the other one with the family fights and so on.
That's part of it.
Okay, let me explain that part that I know about. Oftentimes, and this is probably one of the most exasperating things a law enforcement officer does, he gets a call to go over and Mr. A and Mrs. B are going at it. And the children are hollering and screaming, and they run, they go in there and they take Mrs. A off of here and Mr. A off of here, and they try and talk with them. Finally, it looks like that Mr. A is just beyond all control, and Mrs. A says, arrest him, I don't want to see him in this house ever again. And they arrest him. Before they ever get him down to the station, Mrs. A is down there saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, as bad as he is, he's better than nothing. Now, what has happened in that, law enforcement has backed off of that over the years. They said, hey, wait a minute, Now what Mr. Ortega has done is through lobbying, has got to think, if I see injuries on Mrs. A, she's got a blackened eye or she's cut or she's bruised, the supposition is that Mr. A did it, and we take Mr. A away, and it doesn't matter what she says. Now, the point is here is to reduce
Well, I know that, but do you support this or not?
I support that.
I'm glad to hear you say it.
I do support that.
Yeah,
I don't know anything about the property thing that you're talking about, sir, so I can't address it.
In the 1960s, during the Civil Rights Movement and during the anti-Vietnam War movement, the FBI had a program called COINTELPRO, which
It was COINTELPRO.
COINTELPRO was a program to counteract the peace movements of the Vietnam War, and this went on to some civil rights movements. We saw the black liberation movements in the 60s being termed as by the FBI as black hate groups. And the point of this program, according to the program, which has been published and I read in a book, was to divide the people's movement and to ensure that the people's movement did not grow and threaten the status quo. Also to ensure that the peace movement during the 60s didn't grow. I was wondering if you worked on this program or if you supported it.
Well, the work that I don't know, because the cases would come to me, I don't remember specifically working for COINTELPRO. It would have had it written across the bottom. But I did work an organization called Mothers March Against the War in Vietnam, I think it was, or something of that nature. And what my job was at that time was to, they were picketing the draft boards, or the medicals, where the people go to get their draft things. Induction centers, right. And it was down in New Orleans, and we would get there at 4 o'clock in the morning, and the protesters would get there at 4 o'clock in the morning. One of our guys would go get the coffee, their guys would get the donuts, and we'd sit there until 8 when the newspapers showed up, and then they'd start screaming hi. But I did that in that.
Are you aware that President Reagan has a program coming out now that's designed to once again bring more power to the FBI and CIA to disrupt peace movements, especially centered around solidarity groups that are in solidarity with third world countries. And this is called an anti-terrorism bill, in which the State Department has the power to label any peace group a terrorist group. And these peace groups do not have the opportunity to repeal the decision of the State Department.
I'm not involved in that any longer, so it's very difficult to answer. But let me tell you historically what's happened. When I first went in government service back in '62, we signed a thing, and they had a list of all the parties that at that time were declared subversive, which is that includes something you're talking about. It includes the Lincoln Rockwell Brigade, American Communist Party and all these things. That no longer exists. You can't do that any longer. You're signing these waivers. A lot of people went to jail for that because they refused to sign the waiver. Or they did sign the waiver and then later came out that in 1926 or something they were an American Communist Party. I can't really address that because I'm no longer with the FBI and I didn't do that kind of work.
Okay, I just wanted to point that out to this group because we are.
The new bill would let them do that again.
Peace.
All Schultz has to
Yeah,
say is this group is a terrorist organization because we say it is, and it's illegal just like those groups you just described in 62.
And what Ortega is doing is a part of giving right to the police and sheriff to go inside people's property, private property.
You're talking about the property, I can't address that. I really don't understand that. I don't know it. I know what the other one we're talking about.
No, what you described is exactly what that's all about.
It should be important that you're aware of it because the Rainbow Coalition could be labeled a terrorist group by Mr. Reagan because we oppose his warlike policies.
I think my understanding, however, is of that, and I only get it from the newspapers, probably very much the same place where you get yours, is that that really relates to foreign powers who do terroristic acts in the United States.
Well,
I know it's a very narrow step between the two.
they're talking about solidarity groups too.
You support eliminating the exclusionary rule, like now if the police busted into somebody's house illegally and find drugs there, if they eliminate the exclusionary rule, then they can use that as evidence. So like now the Supreme Court is moving towards eliminating the exclusionary rule. Do you think that would be good for law enforcement?
One of the problems with the exclusionary rule, we're the only country in the world that has it. One of the problems with the exclusionary rule is that if any part of the operation was illegal, the entire operation is illegal. Let me give you an example. Back in 79 or 80, a young girl was found missing, and in Iowa, and it was Christmas time, and the police in another community arrested a guy who they believed to be the suspect. The police from this community went over to pick him up some 70, 80 miles away. On the way back, the two officers were talking, the man's in the back seat. The two officers were talking, and they were talking about Christmas and things of that nature. And one of them says, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could give this girl and her parents a Christian burial at Christmas time? At which time the guy begins to cry and he says, if you'll turn right at the next road, I'll take you to where she's buried. They went over there, they dug her up, there she was. He was convicted, tried and convicted in a court of law. The case was appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States and was thrown out because the exclusionary rule said that the officers acted against the best interest of the person.
Those are just gross violations. They're talking about going into people's houses and getting evidence and then being able to use it. I mean, we're not talking about the violations.
No.
We're talking about the substance of the law that's being altered.
But all point I'm making is that there's a very, very thin line between one or the other. And I think we, as a people, have to watch that. Yes, sir.
Mr. Oliver, I have a question I'd like to answer in two parts.
Okay.
And it's leading up to, what it would lead up to is a question about something that you intend to do as sheriff. And the first part is, I'm not particularly clear about what your active role was as a federal agent of the United States government in New Orleans during the civil rights era. Because you keep saying civil rights. Well, you work with civil rights, but then you say you was neutral as a law enforcement agency. So I would like, could you elaborate on that?
Sure. That was in the 60s where there was lots of activity. I believe we had what did we call the young men that were killed and buried in the dam? I thought I would never forget that. Well, yeah, the shooting of
two Jewish young men and the black.
Right, Goldman, and there were three of them that were killed by, we think, well, we have identified Klansmen, and they killed these three, a Jewish and black boy and a man.
That was in the state of Mississippi.
Yeah, I can't remember where. Meridian, Mississippi.
Yeah, his name is.
And I was actively involved in that as an investigator. Okay, my duties were, someone would give me a list of things to do, and that's what I did. And I never made an arrest on that particular case. I was not involved that much in it. That's what my involvement was. There was, the law said do this. I remember walking down the street of Faraday, Mississippi, right across the river from Louisiana, in which the police the FBI agents would march on the outside by the crowds. The civil rights workers, blacks and civil rights workers from all over, would walk in the middle of the street, and the police were marching between the FBI and between the marchers. And we were hit with everything, you know, tomatoes, it didn't matter, you know, and we did that every day for 30 days. That's when I say... And
what was the purpose?
What was the purpose of us doing that? We were just observers.
Now, I'd like to...
Okay, the second part of your question.
I'd like to make one more point about my reason for asking the question. Because I've become quite concerned when you say that you was involved as an FBI agent in civil rights, because as a matter of public record, under the counterintelligence program of J. Edgar Hoover, the Federal Bureau of Investigation participated in destroying every black organization that we had in America. And they played over 2,000 tricks on these black groups, which most of them only asked for justice. And I haven't heard you mention that. You had to be quite aware of the counterintelligence program of J. Edgar Hoover as an FBI agent, particularly during that time.
I was not a supervisor in the planning areas of that. I'm sorry, I was not involved in the areas in which people made decisions if that's what they were going to do. I read the same things that this gentleman did in the COINTEL program. That the things that we did, I agree. Looking back in retrospect, they were bad. We look back in retrospect to World War II when we incarcerated all the Japanese, and we find that that wasn't right either. These are times that I think our country go through. I'm not saying they're right or they're wrong, but these are the times and periods that we go through, and we adjust to each one of those times. I was involved in all phases, basically criminal, however, but I was there during the civil rights procedures in New Orleans, Shreveport, Louisiana, Meridian, Faraday, those places.
Thank you, sir. The second part is you have stated that there are certain problems that are inherent. You becoming sheriff, people that already are there, and things like that. Now, one of the biggest problems that a lot of people are facing today is criminal misconduct among people who are in executive type positions or sheriffs or high public officials. It's becoming manifested more and more. This is this recent case with the FBI agent recently selling Russians and whatnot. Now, how do you pose to address this? For example, even in banks, a lot of banks are going under today. Small banks starting from $5 million up to $100 million are going under today because of the criminal misconduct of branch presidents. And okay, they make loans to themselves and they make up phony corporations and so forth and get loans quickly and they get their hands on money. Now, paralleling that to the criminal justice system, you would be faced with a very monumental task. How do you see yourself functioning as correcting some of the maladies that are already existing? The reason why you're running against what they call lame duck Sheriff Hill right now.
First of all, those types of things will probably exist forever and ever. When they come to my attention, I will make every effort to bring them to justice. What you're talking about is white-collar crime. The criminal justice system is not really geared properly to handle white-collar crime, and I dislike that. You walk into a 7-Eleven store and you stick up a gun and you say, give me a pack of cigarettes, and you run out the door, and we capture you, you're going to get 5 years, period, at least, okay? Guy walks in the same store, your friend next to you walks in the same store, and they give him he says, I want a pack of cigarettes, will you take this check? And he writes out a check, he didn't have any money in the bank at all. What's the difference between the two? But he's not going to go to jail for 5 years. That's the difference between white-collar crime and violent and person-to-person crime. We need to change those laws. I agree with you. I can't agree with you more. Those white-collar top of the organization crimes go on every day. They are very difficult to break into because who's going to tell anybody anything? It's not like somebody goes in with a gun. It's an entirely different area. I can bring that expertise to the department because I've done that. In fact, it reminds me of a case in which $13 million was stolen from the Navajo tribe. It was a white-collar crime. We identified all the people involved, sent many of them to jail, recovered not only the $13 million, but an additional $4 million that had accrued in interest. So they made money on the deal. But your point is well taken. I don't know if the sheriff can do much about that except support legislation.
Okay, but I'm talking about from things that the sheriff can do, since you've already stated that the sheriff runs the county jail.
Oh,
And I was fortunate enough to hear you on a discussion Sheriff Hill on the Pat McMahon show about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And this was something I really wish more questions would have come in on the point of things that you have to do that fall under your jurisdiction. This gentleman tried to point out of how it's a madhouse.
oh,
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about how the prisoners are treated? How do you feel about the chokehold?
don't like it. And you shouldn't like it either, because as taxpayers, that $15 million judgment that's going to come down is going to come out of your pocket, because the county is not insured. And what happened, that chokehold has been declared illegal in almost every civilized country in the world, or every civilized law enforcement agency in the world. It's a very delicate thing. What you do is you get the crook of the arm, you try and get the Adam's apple, but also connected to the Adam's apple is a little tiny, like a wishbone looking fiber with your bone thing. And if you break that, you busted the windpipe and you die. There's just no way to stop. And it's a matter of how you get, how it's applied. I would not tolerate that. With 5 people standing around, why do you have to put a chokehold on anybody?
Mr. Allen, I want the last word before we go to the city.
All right, let's make this the last question.
This is the last.
Can I talk to you after?
This is just a, so what you're saying, as I discussion on it, are we being sensible then, as and here I go back to a minority community, to find ways to protect ourselves then? Because the way we look at it, we don't really have a protection. We don't really have the police to protect us. So what we have to do is just like this organization has come together, what's the name of the baby? The Committee for Unified Phoenix, where these people come together and try to find ways to protect ourselves against the police brutality. And then if you don't do nothing, if you can't do nothing from a sheriff point of view, then we have to do something as a community.
I think the community is really the answer to the entire problem.
Okay.
And that the community has to tell somebody what's going on. And if you don't tell the sheriff or the chief of police or whoever it is, how's he ever going to know?
All right, that's good.
I will answer your question after.
We got another point.
Okay.
Thank you. I just started late last night. I've been busy all. Can we mail it to you later? Good. Thank you. I'm sorry. It didn't get in till last night.
I'll be waiting for that call.
Okay.
Let's see. Carol?
Excuse us for having to leave, but we got enough.
Oh, if you like, you can sign Jesse Jackson's birthday card on the table.
May I leave some of these focus stickers here with
Oh,
them?
yeah. Put them over on the table.
Okay, thanks.
Sharon, come back before they leave. I'd like to announce that tomorrow at 6 o'clock, we're having a Monday Guerrero party at Southminster Church. Okay, anybody who wants to come. Again,
What time?
You know what? Somebody's already got me up in Cave Creek.
She's got one.
I'm
going to Carol County.
Carol.
That's a good sign that there's so many Mondale Ferraro parties that you don't know which one to go to. Thank you all very much.
From 6 to 8. If I could just make a closing comment, I'd love to come back and spend some more time with you folks. I'd like to be
I really
invited.
joined the coalition. Carol?
bring those absentee in? Township absentee ballot, was I told?
See, I got up at 5:30 this morning to go make signs, and I took those boxes out. You want to have this
Steve, you want to leave some of these for the party tomorrow night?
I'd love to. Thank you very much, Carol.
and the boxes with the rest of my cards are in the car. So I might
Okay, let's let Carolyn get more.
I'll get you some more of those, and might pass them around. Have you already given them one of those? Have you already given them one of those?
No, I don't know.
No, they don't have any. Here, pass these around. Okay, go ahead. Carolyn is running in District 27 for the Senate. She's got a formidable task to try to run against Juanita Harrelson. Sad, Juanita's a nice lady. I mean, you know.
As far, well, it'd be maybe easier if I were running against Jim Skilling. Or Jennifer.
What's the last name first?
It's coming around. Carolyn.
As you can see on my card there, I'm calling my campaign people first. And that is because I've been astutely aware of how the demands of powerful and particularly money interests are attended to in preference to people's needs. I was already angry at our legislature, but since I've been running for this office and studying a little more, I'm just angrier and angrier. I don't even hardly know where to start. And all of those areas that are mentioned on the back of my card are areas of extreme abuse in my mind by our legislature, sacrificing human need for powerful money, person's greed. One example is our Republican health care propositions on the ballot. The legislative propositions on that ballot were all voted for by Republicans in the legislature. Not one Democrat in the legislature voted to pass those propositions. And what they offered to the people of Arizona regarding the cost, terribly escalating, 20% per year escalating cost of health, the hospital cost, was a proposal for a part-time committee that had no power, no authority, no budget, no independent staff, and it's supposed to control hospital costs. In other words, it's a complete sham. It was a way to fool the people. Actually, since 1971, there have been these kinds of committees, and they have not done anything in the area of controlling hospital costs. And as you know, we're sixth in the nation for high hospital costs. The legislature, again, as they have in all things, really want to accommodate the powerful money interests, i.e. the hospital association. How is it ever going to get through that legislature when the Speaker of the House even works for Sancor, or did for 17 years? Another thing that bothers me terribly is that our legislature has gone on the road of bankrupting our state in their attitudes and control in the area of crime. 126% increase. We have the highest lockup rate in the nation and the highest recidivism rate in the nation. And those two factors together have already bankrupted some other states. What I resent very much are prisoners, $35,000 per year, sitting there watching TV all day, scratching in the sand and the dirt more than watching TV probably. Not doing any valuable or regular work, not learning anything. I believe the prisoners should be working and earning partially for their room and board, for victim restitution, for even support of their families if possible. We have, for instance, one little program called the Sex Offender Program. There's room in it for 105 sex offenders. 85% of them do not complete the program. But there are 1,700 prisoners in our Arizona prisons with a sex offense background. 90% of these prisoners are below age 26. They're going to be out into society. What percent, Bill? 70% don't have a high school diploma? It's all these figures. 70% or 80%, I don't know for sure, what, very high, do not have a high school diploma. They leave our prisons without even a GED, without any job skills training. They have learned nothing but more crime. And they're going to be back out into our society with no alternatives but to turn back to their old career. We added to the budget for that Republican attitude of lock them up more and longer. And what we did, we took away from all areas of education, whether it's universities, Department of Education, community colleges, whatever, areas of 20 to 25% decrease, all the, and DES. We have those child abuse workers down there that have 20 times more caseload than recommended for them to handle child protective services. Our child protective services only investigates 40% of the level 1 abuse cases that are reported to them. Those are the very top ones. There are 4 different levels they have designated. It has to be somebody that's half dead or physically hurt or something before they can even get around to them. They're asking for new staff of 77 people in child protective services, and that will raise our attention up to 70%. There are a whole lot of cases, for instance, of emotional and neglect, emotional abuse and neglect. Those are the kind of cases that, and time again, you see this little child running around the neighborhood who's unattended, and for long this child is killed. And this creates more and more crisis. We had in Arizona last year 5,000 women gave birth without any prenatal care. 5,000. And you think of all of those births, people who could not afford prenatal care, what kind of care or medical care or any other kind of care is that same child likely to get. We have 32 teenage pregnancies per day in Arizona. 32 per day. We're 13th in the nation for the highest rate of teenage pregnancies. We should have, of course, easily accessible, free family planning services. Again, these are people's needs that always take a back seat in our legislature. The thing that really got me onto the People First thing is an example of something that doesn't even cost the legislature any money to fund. An example of what they did on their last year's bill on the change of land use for mobile home parks. They created a bill that said when an investor bought a mobile home park, reimbursement for living expenses of those people in the park would be zero if they lived there 4 years, and they had a sliding scale from $2,500 on down to $600 for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Democratic Senator Jaime Gutierrez offered amendment to give $2,500 reimbursement across the board to these mobile home park owners for moving expenses, and that didn't get through our legislature. Not enough Democrats there to do it. These people in mobile home parks, as you know, are usually on fixed income, retired, elderly, whatever. It takes $3,000 or $4,000 to move one of those mobile homes. If they're over 4 years old, they can't find a park to probably put them in, because most new parks won't take an older home. They have to go many miles and make it even more expensive, carry the thing 50 miles or something. I wanted also something called the Uniform Condominium Act. And that didn't even get out of our government committee in our legislature. This is something that wouldn't cost the state anything, just provide people some safeguards. There's some condominium areas, and that is any area that is commonly owned. Could be parking spaces commonly owned. Most condominiums are townhouse areas where there's association. There have been some in Arizona where, in fact, I believe Arab investors, out-of-state investors at least, have come in and turned them into, bought up the majority of them, turned them into time-sharing. That changes the whole nature. If you live in that kind of an association, changes the whole nature of it. You have higher maintenance. And first of all, for all of you can be really ripped off on all your maintenance fees by and people on your board. We need these rules and regulations, and particularly laws for litigations and CC&R problems in these associations. They didn't want to bother themselves, I guess, with people's needs. But you know, there was an investor. They wanted to build some time-sharing condominiums up in Show Low. And he went to the legislature and he said he isn't going to invest his money in this state until he has the rules and regulations all laid out for a time-sharing condominium. So we did get a Uniform Condominium Act for time-sharing. The area that worries me perhaps the most is the area of mental health. We spend less in this state than any state in the union for mental health. There's been the same appropriation for 10 years. I think it's $30 million. It's been the same. It has not increased, and we have so many needs. We're second in the nation in alcoholism. Recently, there was a 160% increase in the heroin addiction treatment center over a 6-month period. We have not enough of these centers. We don't have adequate daycare. We have a mess of regulation, of unregulation in that aspect. We don't have enough community health services besides all of those others that I just mentioned. they become a bigger problem when prevention is not attended to. So what I'm talking about is prevention. I could go on and on actually, but Steve has already mentioned some of our concerns which I share with him about energy problems and about the water. As you know, we got polluted groundwater, and the legislature's not going to hurt the powerful moneyed interest, the factories that are doing it. Transportation.
I'm glad to see you focusing on transportation.
We've already lost industry in our state because they won't come here, particularly in the valley, because it is such a mismatch. We have a terrible problem with transportation.
Yes, we do.
It costs you money to sit at the stoplight for 6 turns while your engine's heating up and the air conditioner's running. But worst of all, it costs poor people money. We don't have any public transportation. It's not just a freeway answer. It's public transportation. Yeah, I always thought that we couldn't have a subway. Somehow, you know, we don't have basements here, so I always thought there must be something unique about our soul. We couldn't have a subway. We can have subways.
Yeah.
Should be a subway clear across town, Main Street, Mason, right downtown Phoenix. At least. And then all over.
I asked my husband the other day, because I was looking at that Circle K big building being built over there on, is it 7th Street? 7th Street. And they got this deep hole, and I said to Joe, I said, hey, look how deep that hole is there, you know, because I thought there's got to be something wrong that everything's sitting on top of the ground. And he said, no, it's cheap. Why do we tell you know, it's cheap not to, you know, not to build a hole. And that's why Arizona's got everything sitting up on top of the ground. But yeah, we could have a subway.
Education, we're about $150 million behind in the market. I believe teachers should be paid more than a garbage man.
Oh, I agree with that.
Oh, they'd be funded Head Start till it's almost gone.
A question, comment, and all that good thing. But I'm very glad to see you focusing on some of the issues of concerns that I am interested in also. We're talking about teenage pregnancy. One of the things that the program that I work with, we are focusing on, we've been all into the schools and to the high schools and colleges with a panel talking about the responsibilities of teenage parenting. And if you notice, south of the Salt River, there's nothing for these children that become pregnant to get any kind of parenting skills, anything. So the program that I direct, which is called Black Community Developers, this is one of the things that we've been focusing on. Also, as you speak about the crime problems that we face here in Phoenix, it's terrible. And they're not going to go away. You know, a quiet tension in a community is dangerous. Right now, we do have a quiet tension. And the only reason that it's quiet right now is because the top just haven't blown all the way off the pot, but it's about to. So we that you that are really thinking about coming into the system and trying to help straighten out some of these things, there is a great need to really concentrate on those things. As I see the jailhouses being built, I do know that most of those rooms, whatever, will be filled with our men if we don't do something about our condition. I look at women playing a real key role in these conditions, because I feel that as we as women, and I look at Reverend Jackson's rainbow again, the rainbow of women coming together can be a leader to a key to opening up a lot of doors. Because believe it or not, women, you know, have power. And once we identify ourselves as friends and friends of friends, we will be able to work on some of those problems and go before the people that we want to address these concerns with. So, and transportation, Carolyn, it's a key. You know, we're talking about poverty-stricken people trying to get on jobs on weekends, no transportation, no buses running, no boom, 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 no nothing. You know, we talk about, you talk about running for whatever you're running for, states and okay, but I look at it, I'm looking at a survivor thing right now from where I'm sitting. See what I mean? So
I just live
it is really serious.
You can't do anything in this valley. You have to go a long, long way for everything. And these elderly persons, for instance, have a doctor's appointment. You realize how much a cab costs. They have to call a cab.
It's just ridiculous.
There is one dial-a-ride service out of Mesa and it doesn't work very well. For instance, they call them up and they assure them they're coming, and they never come. And of course, they miss their doctor's appointment.
So, really, see how serious 1984 makes us look at the thing real serious. Because there are a lot of, and the things that we don't know would probably scare us to death. I mean, we're only talking about the things that they let us find out, that's happening in our city here. But if we were really to go behind the doors and see what really is happening, it would probably scare us to death,
Oh, yes, right.
So I hope that, I'm glad to hear you bring up something. Yeah, but
things there that I can say, but I just say publicly accessible. Like, there's some corruption going on.
And one comment I want to make while Carolyn is still standing here. Now, even though Carolyn is running in legislative district number 27, which is Tempe, when she finally wins, she will be in the state legislation. Whatever she does will affect us no matter what district it is that we're in. And
the idea is we've got to increase the Democratic majority because they just roll over with their absolute intent on accommodating only power structure.
So
that question there, I just happened to notice it as an example. Our legislature and my opponent voted for that bill that would allow the short hoe. And they want to accommodate the grower. He's the guy who's got the money. The heck with the poor worker.
what did you think about our questionnaire?
Oh, that was good. Well, I think it was easy.
It was easy.
For me.
Anyone else want to ask Carolyn a question?
I think you dealt with a lot of specifics, which are real good. I just wondered what you think of the general nature of the problems in Arizona. I mean, Arizona has pretty bad ones. You outlined how many areas that we're among the worst 10 in the country. But, that shows that Arizona specifically, what general problems do you see in Arizona? What's the base of our problems?
Republican legislature. No.
I mean on a social level.
Well, Phil,
I don't know exactly what you're getting at, Phil.
I think you come from a white background and a white city, white part of the country, and you're coming to a rainbow coalition and concerned with general problems. I mean, I think the specifics you gave show that you're very interested in supporting people as you see it, but I don't think you delve into issues that people in Rainbow Coalition are concerned with, the specific issues of racial unity or racial problems or social attitudes.
I've been an activist in that area almost all my life, as far as I can tell. See, I've been started out about 15 years ago being active, and now I was once now I'm president for women's rights. I'm now a member of the state board of ACLU. I've expanded that to everybody's rights that are being violated. I guess that's the main motivation why I got involved in the party work, because I got involved in party work by being the district chair, and then I got kind of railroaded to running. I didn't really intend to run, but the idea was that I had to do something besides just sit back and complain. And the only way to make any difference is politically, where the vote is taken. It's the only way you could really, in the long run, in the end, make any difference. And so that's why I'm working very hard at this.
You think
and
you can
in fact, I haven't even paid any attention to my business for 3 months.
think you can win?
Well, if I can get enough people help. I'm planning for the district, get out the vote on every precinct level, on the precinct level, 45 precincts. We will have a headquarters in each precinct, and we need 8 or 10 people to get out the vote. We're
For
going
each precinct?
in each
Promise me
precinct.
something, I'll work it.
That's about 400 staff people that I need working on November the 6th. If we call every Democrat, there are 23,000 Democrats in this district.
In 27?
Yes. The usual voter turnout is like 21,000 in a general election.
With the president?
All of them, yeah, right. So you can see what happened. We're going to nag every Democrat until they go to the polls. Now you can see what would happen if we got 50%
Even
of
those
them.
who say they're going to
If we
vote for
got
Reagan?
60% of them,
Even
70.
though we don't want to tag those now, like for example, I've called Democrats and they said, I'm voting for Reagan, I don't leave them alone. Hope they stay home.
Hey, a lot of them are
When they tell me they vote for Reagan,
Well,
I
it's
write
still
down.
better than trying to get
Now, the
a
only
Republican
thing-
to vote.
Now, the only difference is, some said they were going to vote for Reagan, but they still were going to go for our state
Right.
ticket.
That's what-
I got that information.
That's
all
what the political science surveys have shown, that if a person in the party switches over at the top of the ticket, if they call themselves a Democrat, they'll usually vote the rest of the slate. So even at that, there's some advantage. And hopefully before Election Day,
We might be able to.
we will have some more enlightenment in the public on Reagan and Mondale situation.
Listen, you know, this is being called a great, I have never heard so much about a debate as I have heard on all the levels of programs this week. That's what got me through that. So maybe we got a party here. You want to ask her any more questions? Because we're here for March. Huh? I hope she wins. We gonna get.
The main thing you can do
We
is,
gonna get out there.
if you live in a district, for instance, where it's hopeless, you know, like it's 3-1 Republican, you know that Democrats can't win there. Come down and help in our district. I'm getting help from the rest of the East Valley districts who don't even have a Democratic slate over in Mesa and 21 north and east of us, because it doesn't matter where you work to get out the Democratic vote. You may as well work where it helps to get out also a legislative slate and get people to the polls. It'll be touch and go, finding that many people available on November the 6th. Some people in my staff of wonderful precinct workers, see, I've had 40 out of the 45 precinct captains, and they've canvassed their precinct to register people. They've been correcting the cards and all of that stuff. Some of these people are taking off a day of vacation or a day of personal leave to work on November 6th. And I've had even some say that they're going to take off a day without pay. So that's real dedication. And if we have enough people that really care and are concerned about getting out the Democratic vote, we can just shock the socks off of them, because they don't expect Democrats to get out to vote. That's the problem. The Democratic Party is very much lower rate in voting. And so what we've got to do is get them out there. If you live in a district where maybe it's easy, maybe it's a 2-to-1 Democrat, and that candidate really doesn't need your help, or if it's impossible, let Carol know or let me know. My number's on the back there. I'll put you in the scheme. What precinct you need to work in.
Soon as you see everything.
How about getting them?
I gotta go.
Oh, I'm gonna take a personal leave day.
It's hard in the areas that
We are one of the
need
targeted
help.
districts for a new Senate seat. They're working also on some, to keep some that may be in
Oh, I know
danger.
what I was gonna say.
But only District 16, which Matt Wheeler is running in my district, do they think there's any possibility of us winning.
An impossibility.
There is any possibility.
Well, I'm hoping that the Republicans, because of the polls, will be so complacent and think they've got it, that some of them will stay home.
But we still get out
They
the
won't
Democratic vote. It'll
No,
be
can we get out
impressive.
the Democratic vote? That's what, no,
But
I'm
there are
Isn't that some
20,
logic in that? I'm hoping some, yeah, they'll be so lazy, well, we got this thing won, they'll be home and we work overtime getting the people out, and we might be able to do
See,
it.
and now that's what happened in Louisiana.
Well, I'm saying, that's what I'm saying, I'm hoping we'll get out the vote, we'll work hard, and you know,
That's a lazy.
I tell you, I don't drink, but if you all can win District 27, I'll take it.
A bottle or just a drink?
Another thing you could do too, and even if I lose, I figure I can get a lot of educating done. No candidates want to talk about these things. They don't want to talk negatively. They just want to tell everybody it's peaches and cream out there, you know. So,
That's Marcia.
you can have coffees in your own neighborhood and stuff like that. Invite me over and I can talk about a lot of things. Get them motivated to see the reason. Most people are not even aware of who their legislature is or any of the issues legislatively and how it affects them personally at home.
That's true.
And I hope I mentioned a few of them to show you how it does affect you right in your own.
Now, you know, when I first started out telling you whom we were endorsing, I didn't have my little slip. I had Carolyn Max and Steve Compton and yeah, you have more questions? And Diane Feldman, Ken Oliver, Marsha Weeks, Rich Dennis, Marsha Embers, Carolyn Walker, Mondo Reese, Art Hamilton, Earl Wilcox, and Chuy Aguia. Those are our targeted people. No, this is Marsha Ember, and she is running for the county recorder's office.
You don't want to stand up and take a stretch?
I've been stretching.
Yeah, you've been sitting here.
Marsha's got some strong options.
Oh, boy. Well, don't you want to stretch your bow or something? I mean, God, isn't your bottom numb from sitting there? Oh, I can't sit that long.
I'd be up and down.
Let's go. Doing it, brother.